There are moments when the earth shakes beneath our feet, not with earthquakes, but with uncertainty. Systems we trusted in begin to tremble. The plans we laid down with care start to unravel. We look around and wonder, has God forgotten? Has heaven gone silent? But hear this now, and hear it with the full weight of truth. God has not forgotten you. In fact, in the very moment when darkness gathers its strength, when the world begins to groan under the weight of its own collapse, heaven responds not with hesitation, but with command. Not with a whisper, but with the movement of an army. And at the front of that army, Michael is assigned. Not just any angel, not just a messenger with news. No, Michael is not sent when things are calm. He is sent when the battle reaches a level that demands the full authority of heaven's warrior. When the enemy rises like a flood, when nations are stirred, when chaos is loosed in the streets, and in the hearts of men, God does not sit back and watch. He moves, and when he moves, he assigns. You see, Michael isn't just a figure in ancient scrolls. He isn't just a symbol of strength from the past. No, he is an active agent of divine authority, dispatched in real time into real situations for the people of God. His name means who is like God, not a question of doubt, but of challenge, a declaration shouted into the face of darkness, who dares rise against the throne of the Most High. Michael does not come to negotiate, he comes to war, he comes to guard, he comes to tear down strongholds that stand in your way. And now he has been assigned to you. When Daniel was praying, fasting, seeking answers while Babylon ruled and Persia rose, the heavens shifted. But for 21 days there was silence. Do you remember what the angel said when he finally arrived? From the moment you set your heart to seek God, I was sent, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. The angel couldn't break through until Michael came. Michael didn't just assist, he broke the resistance. There are moments in your life, perhaps this very moment, where it seems like nothing is breaking. You pray and it feels like silence. You cry out and the heavens seem sealed. But the delay is not denial. The resistance is not the end. Sometimes God is sending a Michael, and when Michael moves, things shift. When Michael is assigned, the impossible begins to tremble. Chains that seemed forged in eternity begin to break. This isn't poetic language. This is spiritual reality. The battle you are in is not against flesh and blood. You know that, but sometimes we forget what that truly means. It means you're not just dealing with circumstances, you're dealing with principalities. And those principalities have studied you, they've charted your bloodline, they know where your family broke, where your mind struggles, where your soul is weary. But heaven knows too, and heaven has an answer, and God's answer is not passive, it's not timid, it's not delayed out of disinterest. The moment you turned your face toward him, he moved, and now Michael stands on assignment, not in theory, but in truth. Assigned for your breakthrough, assigned for your protection, assigned for your purpose. Do you understand what that means? It means the battle is not yours to fight alone. It means that what looks like a losing field is already under divine surveillance. It means you are not outnumbered. You are overshadowed by the power of heaven. When the system fails, God sends reinforcement. When the structure breaks, God sends a shield. When the world says you're finished, God says you've just been activated. And Michael doesn't just protect individuals, he guards destinies. You may think your life is too small for an archangel to be concerned with, but heaven doesn't measure value the way men do. Heaven sees purpose, heaven sees promise, and when that purpose is under fire, heaven doesn't hesitate. There is something over your life that's worth fighting for. That's why the battle has been so fierce. That's why the resistance has been so strong. The darkness knows who you are, and now it knows who has been assigned to you. So don't mistake the silence for abandonment. Don't let the delay lead you to despair. There is movement behind the veil. There is warfare in the invisible, and heaven has moved, God has spoken, the order has been issued. Michael has been assigned. When the system begins to crack, when the foundations of the world begin to tremble, most people panic. They scramble to hold together what cannot be saved. They look to governments, to science, to money, to the structures they've trusted their entire lives. But there's a truth that most are not ready to hear. The system was never built to last. The system was always going to fail, not because God failed, but because it was never the final answer. The system's failure is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a divine awakening. God allows the shaking so that what cannot be shaken may remain. And what is that which cannot be shaken? It is the kingdom that's not made by human hands. The kingdom that doesn't rise and fall with elections, with markets, with media, with the approval of men. When the system fails, it reveals who truly rules. When the lights go out in Babylon, the throne of heaven begins to shine. We are living in a time where the systems of this world, political systems, economic systems, even religious systems, are breaking down. The trust of men is collapsing, but to the child of God, this is not a tragedy. It's a trumpet blast. It's a sign that what was built in human strength is being brought to its knees so that we might finally look up. You see, the people of Israel were never supposed to depend on Egypt, but when famine came, they went there. And for a while, it worked. Egypt gave them food, land, safety, but what began as a solution became a system of bondage. And so it always goes. The system that feeds you can also enslave you. The system that offers comfort eventually demands compromise. And when the people cried out to God under the weight of Pharaoh's rule, God didn't just fix the system. He delivered them from it. And that's what he's doing again. When the system begins to fail, when you lose the job, when the doctor gives the report, when the phone doesn't ring, when the plan doesn't work, don't rush to patch the hole. Don't cling to the broken scaffolding. Instead, listen for the voice of deliverance. God is not trying to fix the failing system. He's using its failure to wake you up to something eternal. This is what we often miss. The failure is not the enemy, it's the message. The brokenness is not the end, it's the beginning. God lets the system fail because he's trying to shift your vision from the seen to the unseen, from the temporal to the eternal, from the kingdom of man to the kingdom of God. The collapse is a call. The ruin is a revelation. It's in the breaking that the voice of God comes clearer. When Elijah stood on the mountain, it wasn't in the wind or the fire or the earthquake that God was found. It was in the still, small voice after the shaking. So don't fear the shaking. Don't run from it. Embrace it. Because after the shaking comes the glory. After the collapse comes the call. After the silence comes the sound of purpose being reborn. Some of you have been wondering why everything is falling apart, why things you trusted in are no longer working, why people you leaned on are suddenly silent, why your routines have been interrupted. It's because God is trying to unplug you from the system and reconnect you to the source. This is not punishment, it's preparation. This is not the end, it's the reset. You weren't born to be a cog in the machine. You weren't made to live by the script of this world. You were created for something higher, something holy, something eternal. And now that the system has failed, you're finally free to see it. That's why Michael has been assigned. That's why the shaking is intensifying. That's why you feel the tension in your spirit. Because the enemy knows that if you ever wake up, if you ever see what's really happening, you'll never go back to Egypt again. You'll never settle for Pharaoh's food when you've tasted manna from heaven. So let it fall. Let the idols crash. Let the towers crumble. Don't try to save the system, rise from it. You were never meant to be sustained by Babylon. You were meant to be sent from Zion, The failure of the system is not the loss of your life, it's the beginning of your calling. God is waking you up. You cannot fight a spiritual war with natural weapons. You cannot stand in a battlefield you cannot see unless your eyes have been opened. That's where so many lose the battle before it even begins, not because they are weak, not because they lack faith, but because they're still trying to fight spiritual warfare with carnal vision. They're swinging at shadows, reacting to what's in front of them, never realizing that the real battle is behind the veil. You feel discouraged, overwhelmed. Anxious things are moving around you, collapsing even. But what you don't realize is that what you're seeing with your natural eyes is only the echo of what's happening in the unseen. The conflict in your home is not just about attitudes. The depression on your soul is not just mental. The blockages in your path are not just circumstantial. There is a war raging, and you are in the middle of it. Not because you're cursed, but because you're called. You were never meant to walk through this world unaware. You were never meant to look at everything through a lens shaped only by the physical. That's why the Word says we walk by faith, not by sight. It doesn't say you don't walk. It says you don't walk by what you can see. Because what you see is often a lie. What you see is shaped by time, by fear, by pain, by limitation. But there's another realm, the realm that doesn't lie, the realm where truth is not hidden but revealed. And if you're going to survive this hour, you must see in the Spirit. This isn't mysticism. This isn't fantasy. This is biblical reality. The prophets weren't special because they had gifts. They were special because they could see. Elijah didn't panic when the army surrounded the city. His servant did. Why? Because the servant was only looking with natural eyes. He saw chariots of war, and he trembled. But Elijah prayed, "Lord, open his eyes." And suddenly the servant saw the hills filled with chariots of fire, not the enemies, but heavens. That's the shift you need. That's the vision that will sustain you in a collapsing world. You must stop seeing with fear and start seeing with revelation. Because when you see who is for you, the power of who's against you begins to shrink. And this is why the enemy fights your focus, why he clouds your vision, why he distracts you, deceives you, bombards your mind with confusion and noise. Because if you ever started seeing in the Spirit, if you ever discerned what's really happening, you'd stop running and start warring. You'd stop questioning and start declaring. You'd stop surviving and start overcoming. Michael has not been sent for you to sit in defeat. He has been sent because heaven sees what you're up against, and heaven is responding. But if you never open your spiritual eyes, you'll live like heaven is distant, when in reality it's already moving on your behalf. The enemy wants you to believe that nothing is happening, that your prayers are hitting the ceiling, that your worship is empty, that your calling is over, that your breakthrough is delayed forever. But those are lies whispered into the natural mind. That's why you have to rise above. That's why you must stop walking in reaction and start walking in revelation. Because the truth is, when you pray, something shifts. When you praise, something breaks. When you declare, heaven listens. When you step out in faith, angels move. You may not see it yet, but it's happening. It's already begun. And the closer you get to the moment of breakthrough, the louder the lies will become. That's not because God is absent, it's because the darkness senses that its grip is slipping. But if you let your natural feelings dictate your spiritual posture, you'll surrender territory that was already given to you. If you let the storm determine your silence, you'll miss the power that was meant to be loosed through your voice. The battle will not be won in your strength. It will not be won with good intentions or comfortable routines. It will be won when you see differently, when you stop looking at the size of the obstacle and you start remembering the size of your God, when you stop listening to the voice of defeat and you start standing on the promises that were spoken over you in eternity. You were never called to fight blind. You were never called to wander through darkness hoping for light. You've been given the Spirit, not a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And with that Spirit comes vision. Comes discernment, comes revelation. You can see what others miss. You can hear what others ignore. You can walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil. Not because it isn't there, but because you see what they don't. The war is real. The resistance is strong. But so is the one who stands with you. So is the one who fights for you. And so is the one who now walks beside you. You are not alone in this. Open your eyes. Before the light breaks through the clouds, the sky often darkens. Before the first sound of morning, the night reaches its coldest, quietest hour. There's a principle in the ways of God, one that most of us miss, because we don't like the discomfort it brings. But it's real, it's consistent, it's holy. The shaking always comes before the glory. The wilderness comes before the promised land. The cross comes before the crown. You want to walk in glory, then you have to walk through shaking. You want to see the victory, then you have to stand in the war. You want resurrection, then you have to face the tomb. That's how it's always worked. That's how it worked for Abraham, for Moses, for David, for Paul, yes, even for the Son of God. And it's how it will work for you. But here's the mystery hidden in what looks like pain is the preparation for power. What looks like chaos is the clearing of the old to make room for the new. You see, God doesn't build on shaky ground. So before he brings the fire, he clears the altar. Before he pours out the new wine, he breaks the old wineskin. And before he reveals the fullness of his glory, he shakes everything that can be shaken. You're asking God for breakthrough, and that's good. But don't be surprised when the answer doesn't come in peace. It comes in pressure. You're asking for purpose, but purpose comes out of pressure. It's the pressing of the olive that brings the oil. It's the crushing of the grapes that releases the wine. And it's the shaking of your world that positions you for the weight of his glory. The shaking is not your punishment, it's your proving ground. It's where your character is tested, where your motives are refined, where your roots either go deep or get exposed. Anyone can worship when everything's easy. Anyone can praise when everything's working. But can you bless him when the walls are shaking? Can you trust him when you don't understand? Can you still believe when the system you built your life on is falling apart? Because that's where the glory comes. Not after you've figured it all out, not after the circumstances change, but right there, in the middle of the mess, when everything else is falling and only he remains. That's where the glory rests. That's where he meets you not in your strength, but in your surrender. You're not being shaken because you're weak. You're being shaken because you're close. The enemy doesn't fight what isn't threatening. The storm doesn't rage unless you're carrying something worth stopping. And the greater the shaking, the greater the glory on the other side. Don't curse the shaking. Don't run from it. Let it do its work. Let it break what needs to be broken. Let it strip away what was never supposed to be part of your destiny. Let it expose the false comforts, the misplaced trust, the hidden fears. Because once the shaking ends, what's left standing is real. It's eternal. It's unshakable. The enemy wants you to think the shaking means God has left. But it's the opposite. The shaking means he's drawing near. He's preparing the vessel for something heavy, something holy, something eternal. And glory is not light, it's weight. The Hebrew word for glory, kabod, literally means weight. You've been asking for glory, but can you carry it? Can you stand under it? The shaking makes you ready for the weight. The trial makes you ready for the mantle. The breaking makes you ready for the blessing. And here's what's already happening in the shaking. Heaven is mobilizing. Michael is moving. Angels are on assignment. And while your world trembles, the foundations of the kingdom are standing firm. You're not being abandoned. You're being transformed. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. When the earthquake hit in Acts, the prison doors didn't just open for Paul and Silas, they opened for everyone. When God shakes a thing, He doesn't just bring glory for you. He brings freedom for those around you. Your shaking might be the key to someone else's breakthrough. Your praise in the storm might be the sound that sets a generation free. So lift your head, hold your ground, don't despise the shaking. Let it remind you that something holy is near. The deeper the shaking, the closer the glory. The greater the resistance, the more powerful the release. The enemy senses what's coming. He knows what's been assigned. He hears the movement in the heavens, and it terrifies him. But for you, it's confirmation.